honest with you, I have a PhD in resource economics. I have advised governments in 4 countries on how to manage oil revenue. I have published papers on sovereign wealth funds, the resource curse, and intergenerational equity. And for 15 years, I quietly believed that if you gave a government the right framework, the right institutions, the right incentives, any country could become Norway. My former student Marcus is a policy advisor in Nigeria. He read every paper I ever wrote, and one night he sent me an email that ended my certainty. He said, "Dr. Novak, I've implemented everything you recommended, and it still isn't working. What are we missing?" I booked a flight to Oslo the next week because I realized I had been teaching Norway without ever going there. What I found when I arrived did not fit in any of my papers, and I want to show you what I actually saw. The first thing that confuses Americans in Norway is the gasoline price. Norway pumps oil out of the North Sea. It is one of the wealthiest nations on Earth, measured by per capita income, by sovereign assets, by nearly every metric economists use. And the price of gasoline at Norwegian pumps is among the highest in the world, significantly higher than what Americans pay, significantly higher than what most Europeans pay. I stood at a gas station outside Oslo on my second morning and tried to explain this to myself using my own 15 years of expertise. I could not do it. The framework I had built my career on, that resource-rich governments inevitably spend their windfall on subsidies and short-term consumption to buy political support, simply did not apply here. The Norwegian government was taxing its own citizens heavily on the product it was also selling to the world at enormous profit. It was using that tax revenue to subsidize electric vehicles, to build charging infrastructure, to accelerate the transition away from the very industry that was funding the entire operation. I called Marcus from the gas station parking lot and told him what I was looking at. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's the part I can't replicate. The part where the government does the thing that is correct long-term even when it's painful short-term. How do you build that?" I didn't have an answer yet. I needed to go further back than the oil. But nothing I found in the economics literature prepared me for what that actually meant. Norway did not discover oil until 1969. Before that, it was poor. Not metaphorically poor. Genuinely, historically poor. A country of farmers and fishermen clinging to a coastline of brutal terrain where less than 4% of the land was arable, where the winters were long and the growing seasons short, and the sea was both the primary food source and the primary threat. The Norwegian coastline is so jagged and complex, over 25,000 kilometers of it, including the fjords, that the sea was more navigable than the land. Communities on opposite sides of a mountain range that would take days to cross by land could reach each other by boat in hours. The ocean was not a barrier, it was the road. This shaped everything. It shaped the Viking era, not the horned helmet caricature, but the actual historical phenomenon of a maritime people whose shipbuilding technology was centuries ahead of anything else in the North Atlantic, who navigated to Iceland, Greenland, and North America long before Columbus was born, who established trade networks from the Middle East to the British Isles. It shaped the centuries of union with Denmark and then Sweden, through which Norwegian identity remained distinct, because geography kept it distinct. Each valley, each fjord community developed its own dialect, its own traditions, its own costume, its own specific knowledge of its specific terrain. It shaped the hard-won independence of 1905, when Norway became a fully sovereign nation after nearly 4 centuries of foreign rule, and the even harder trauma of German occupation in World War II, which left in the Norwegian collective memory a very specific lesson about what happens to a small country that cannot defend itself. What all of this produced, before a single barrel of oil was pumped from the North Sea, was a population with a very particular relationship to scarcity, to community, and to the long term. A population that had learned, over centuries, that individual survival and community survival were not separable, that the winter was coming for everyone, that the only rational response to a harsh environment was to take care of each other. I sent Marcus a voice message from Bergen explaining this. He listened and wrote back immediately. Dr. Novak, Nigeria has hard winters too. Not cold winters, hard ones. We have also learned that the community is the only buffer. So why doesn't it produce the same result? I didn't have a good answer, but the question made me realize I was still looking in the wrong place. I spent 15 years looking for the institutional explanation for Norway's success with oil. What I found in Oslo and Bergen, and the farms of Hardanger, and the fishing villages of the Lofoten Islands was something that precedes institutions. Something that institutions are built on top of, not the other way around. But none of that was the thing that stopped me cold. That came from an unwritten rule that no Norwegian will tell you about directly because to explain it openly would violate it. There is an unofficial social code in Norway that Norwegians describe with a Danish word, janteloven, the law of Jante. It comes from a 1933 satirical novel, but it captures something much older. A set of unspoken rules that amount to, you are not more important than the rest of us. Do not think you are special. Do not display your success in ways that separate you from the community. Do not make noise about what you have. Americans tend to interpret this as repression, as the suppression of individual ambition. I interpreted it this way for years, when I only knew it as a concept in a textbook. Standing in Oslo, I understood it differently. The streets of Oslo are not lined with the architecture of inequality. There are no gated communities, no conspicuous luxury compounds, no visible hierarchy written into the built environment. The public transit system is flawless not because only poor people use it, but because everyone uses it, including people who could afford not to. The schools are funded uniformly across the income spectrum. The hospitals are available to everyone at the same quality. The wealth of the nation is present everywhere and visible nowhere, because it has been converted into the texture of daily life rather than the trophies of the successful. I want to describe one specific morning because it captures this better than any statistic I know. I was on the Oslo Metro, Line 5, heading east from the city center at 7:30 in the morning. Across from me sat a man in a well-cut suit reading a financial newspaper. Next to him, a teenager in school uniform with headphones, a woman in scrubs who had clearly just finished a night shift, a construction worker in steel-toe boots eating a sandwich. The carriage was clean. The seats were not worn. The train was on time. Everyone was on the same train, not because they had to be, because it was simply the best way to get where they were going. That is what invisible wealth looks like in practice. Not a private car for some and a broken bus for others. One system, good enough for everyone. The Oslo Opera House, completed in 2008, is the clearest architectural expression of this. A building of white Italian marble that slopes directly into the Oslofjord, its roof designed as a public plaza where anyone can walk, sit, look out over the water. The building cost over $600 million. It was built with public money, and then it was given, physically and literally, to the public not as an entrance to a performance space but as a piece of the city that belongs to everyone regardless of whether they ever buy a ticket. Across the bay, the Akershus fortress dates from the late 13th century, thick stone walls with few decorative details, built by a small kingdom that understood its own vulnerability and built accordingly. The two structures face each other across the same water. One built to survive, one built to be shared. Both expressing, in different centuries and different materials, the same underlying conviction that the wealth and strength of the nation must serve the public benefit rather than perform the power of whoever currently holds it. On the 17th of May, Norway's Constitution Day, this conviction becomes visible in a way that consistently surprises foreign visitors who expect something else. There is no military parade, no display of weapons or tanks, no long political speeches. The center of the national celebration is children, thousands of school children marching through the streets of every Norwegian city and town, holding flags, accompanied by school bands, watched by families eating ice cream and waving. Adults wear the bunad, the traditional regional costume, with embroidery specific to each area of the country, each pattern a record of a particular valley's particular history. The king and queen stand on the palace balcony and wave back at the children marching past. The national day of one of the world's most powerful economies looks, from the outside, like a very well-organized school parade. Marcus asked me about this when I described it. He said, "Why children?" I told him, because the whole framework is for them. The oil fund does not pay out to current citizens, it invests. The principle is untouched. Only a portion of the returns are used in the national budget each year. The children marching past the palace are the people the fund is actually for, the generation that will inherit it, and the one after that. Putting children at the center of the National Day is not sentiment. It is an accurate statement of priority. The oil fund has a binding rule. It can only spend a limited portion of its returns each year. Not the principle, never the principle. The rule has held through financial crises, through elections, through a pandemic. The discipline is not maintained by individual virtue. It is maintained by a structure that is harder to break than to follow, and by a public that would notice immediately if someone tried. This is not socialism as Americans argue about it. It is something more specific. A society that has decided, through long experience, that converting wealth into shared infrastructure is more durable than converting it into private accumulation. Janteloven is not the suppression of ambition. It is the redirection of ambition from accumulation toward contribution. Marcus would call me from Abuja and ask, "How do you legislate that? How do you write Janteloven into a governance framework?" You cannot. That was the answer I was building toward. You cannot legislate it because it is not a policy. It is a culture. And culture is not made in a generation. It is made in centuries of hard winters. But here is the part that made me put down my coffee and stare at the fjord for a very long time. None of this is to say that Norway is without contradiction. It is not. And the contradiction I found most instructive is the one that sits at the center of the country's identity. Norway is an oil state. It is also, by many measures, the world's most committed nation to the elimination of oil as a fuel. These two things are simultaneously true, and the Norwegian government does not pretend otherwise. The Sovereign Wealth Fund, formerly called the Government Pension Fund Global, informally called the Oil Fund, currently holds over $1.5 trillion in assets accumulated from petroleum revenue. It is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. It owns small percentages of nearly every publicly traded company on Earth. Every Norwegian citizen is, in a sense, a fractional owner of a global investment portfolio built on fossil fuel revenue. And Norway is using that revenue to build a post-fossil fuel society at home. Over 90% of new car sales in recent years have been electric, the highest rate in the world. The government achieved this not through mandates but through incentives, tax relief, free parking, bus lane access. The electric car became the economically rational choice before it became the culturally dominant one. The government did not tell Norwegians what to do. It rearranged the incentives until the correct behavior became the obvious one. Marcus asked me once, "Why can't we do that in Nigeria?" The answer is that you can, technically. The policies are replicable. What is harder to replicate is the trust. Norwegians comply with the tax structure because they believe, based on long historical experience, that the government will use the revenue for the stated purpose, that the money collected for public transit will go to public transit, that the money taxed from gasoline will go to electric vehicle infrastructure. In a context where that trust does not exist, the same policy produces different results. The policy is not the variable. The trust is the variable. and trust is built over generations, not electoral cycles. I kept coming back to this as I traveled further from Oslo, into the landscape that built the trust. Hardanger is a region of western Norway where the fjords cut so deep into the mountains that glacial meltwater runs down into orchards of apple trees growing at water level. The minerals from the glaciers carried by the melt giving the fruit a particular intensity. In spring, white apple blossoms open under peaks still covered in snow. The visual effect is precisely the kind of contradiction Norway keeps producing. Harsh and delicate simultaneously, the extreme and the gentle in the same frame. Veringsfossen waterfall drops nearly 200 meters from the Hardangervidda plateau into a canyon of ancient stone. The viewing infrastructure around it, a pedestrian bridge, carefully designed sightlines, allows access without alteration. The waterfall remains the center of the scene. This is a consistent principle in Norwegian infrastructure. Serves the experience without replacing it. The Borgund Stave Church, built in the late 12th century, stands in a valley as if it decided to become part of the landscape rather than interrupt it. It was built without a single metal nail, assembled entirely through a system of interlocking wooden joints, the pine, coated in tar to survive centuries of Norwegian weather. The dragon heads on the roofline carry the memory of a pre-Christian mythology that the builders chose to keep even as they built a Christian church. Norse and Catholic coexisting in the same structure, because the community that built it saw no reason to erase one to accommodate the other. This capacity for holding contradictions without resolving them, oil state and green leader, ancient mythology and modern institution, individual ambition and collective restraint, runs through everything. The Hellesilt farm sits under a natural stone overhang, two small wooden houses nestled against the cliff. The people who built here did not try to reshape the terrain. They built where the terrain allowed it. The houses are small because a larger house would have been impossible to heat. The roof follows the angle of the rock. Every decision is a negotiation with the physical reality of the place, not a declaration of intent to overcome it. I met a farmer in Hardanger named Eric in his 60s, fourth generation on the same land, growing apples below glaciers that his great-grandfather had also grown apples below. I asked him whether the glaciers had changed in his lifetime. He looked at the peaks above us for a long moment. Then he said, "Every generation of my family has watched them. They are smaller now." He said this without drama, without grief, in the same tone he had used to describe the apple harvest. The glacier is changing. We are watching it. We will adapt. That is what we do. I grew up in Austin, Texas. I know what it looks like when humans decide to impose themselves on a landscape, air conditioning against the heat, irrigation against the drought, highways through the desert. Norway looks like the opposite decision, not passivity. Negotiation, a different kind of intelligence that does not read as intelligence until you understand what it is responding to. I described Eric to Marcus on a call that night. The farmer, the glacier, the 4 generations. The way he said "we will adapt" in the same tone as the harvest was good. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's not culture, Dr. Novak. That's wealth. He can afford to adapt. We cannot." A Nigerian farmer watching his land dry up doesn't say "we will adapt." He leaves. It was the sharpest thing Marcus had ever said to me. And he was not wrong. I closed my laptop and sat on the bed in my guest house in Hardanger and looked at the glacier through the window for a long time. I had been so convinced I was finding the answer. And Marcus, 29 years old, working in a government office in Abuja, the student I had taught the resource curse to in a seminar room in Austin, had just cut through everything I thought I'd understood with one sentence. I felt the specific discomfort of someone who has traveled a long way to confirm a belief and has instead discovered a question they are not equipped to answer. I needed to go further. I needed to find the thing that Marcus couldn't replicate even in principle. The Lofoten Islands are above the Arctic Circle, north of the mainland by a ferry ride through water that is rarely calm. The fishing villages Reinøy, Hamnøy, O sit at the base of jagged rock mountains that rise almost vertically from the sea. The red wooden houses called Rorbu perched right at the water's edge. The red paint is not decorative. It helped fishermen locate their homes in blizzard and fog. Form following function with a particular Norwegian elegance of not distinguishing between the two. Every winter, the cod migrate from the Barents Sea to the spawning grounds off Lofoten. For centuries, this migration was the economic lifeline of the archipelago. The fish were split and hung on wooden racks, held in the cold, dry air, no salt required, wind and temperature doing the preservation work with no fuel cost and no refrigeration. The result after months of drying is stockfish, concentrated protein that could be stored for years and transported without spoilage. Before Norway was an oil state, it was a fish state. The stockfish from Lofoten entered European trade networks in the medieval period and financed centuries of Norwegian economic life. Even Henningsvær's football stadium is built on a flat rock outcropping surrounded by the sea. It is not separated from the working landscape of fishing and drying racks. It sits in the middle of it. The pitch and the HL share the same island. Sport is not a separate category from work and weather and the specific geography of surviving in this place. It is part of the same whole. I stood in Reinøy in October and watched the weather change from sunshine to horizontal rain and back to sunshine within 40 minutes. The fisherman I spoke with through a translator described this as normal, not difficult. Normal. The expectation is not that conditions will be favorable. The expectation is that conditions will be variable and that you will have prepared for that. The mental model of Norwegian life, as I came to understand it over those weeks, is fundamentally oriented toward preparation rather than assumption. The winter is coming, the storm is possible, the oil money will eventually run out. Prepare accordingly. I thought I had found the answer. I hadn't, because nothing I had seen yet showed me where Norway's model actually breaks. Tromsø sits 350 kilometers above the Arctic Circle. In winter, the sun does not rise for 2 months. In summer, it does not set for 2 months. The human relationship with time in this city is genuinely different from anywhere I had previously been organized around light rather than clock, around the rhythm of seasons rather than the structure of a working week. Shops, cafes, and community life continue through the polar night not by ignoring the darkness, but by accommodating it. The aurora borealis appears regularly above the city, green and violet curtains across the sky. The locals notice it with the calm of people who have lived their whole lives under extraordinary natural phenomena and understand that the correct response is not excitement but attention. Beneath the frozen bays and cold waters, pods of orca whales coordinate their hunting of herring schools in movements so choreographed that marine biologists have spent decades studying them without fully understanding the communication that makes them possible. The Sami people, Norway's indigenous population, whose reindeer herding culture has operated in these Arctic territories for thousands of years, have a concept of the landscape, of its seasons and its moods, that has no equivalent in the economic frameworks I was trained in. They name places not by geography but by the events that happen there. Not the mountain, but the place where the reindeer shelter when the east wind comes. The land as accumulated experience rather than fixed coordinate. The Sami conflict with Norwegian energy development is real and ongoing, and it is the place where Norway's self-image cracks most visibly. Wind farms proposed for reindeer herding land create a collision between two Norwegian values that cannot both win: the green transition and the rights of the indigenous population whose land the transition requires. Ruled in 2021 that the Fosen wind farm violated the Sami people's right to cultural practice under international human rights law. The ruling was unambiguous. The turbines remained standing for 2 years after the ruling, while the government debated how to comply. Young Sami activists occupied the entrance to the Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy. They held signs that read, "The green shift cannot be built on our rights." This is Norway's contradiction made fully visible. The same country that lectures the world on sustainable development and indigenous rights built illegal wind turbines on indigenous land and left them running for 2 years after a court told them to stop. Not because of malice. Because the green transition and the Sami rights both had powerful constituencies, and the government could not figure out how to give both what they were owed. Marcus asked me when I described this whether it surprised me. I told him, "It is the most honest thing I have found here." A country that has solved many problems and is openly, publicly struggling with the ones it has not yet solved. The struggling is part of the honesty. And then, at the very end of Norway, further north than I had thought it was possible to build anything at all, I found the thing that reframed everything I had seen before it. But before I get there, there is something I have to tell you. Something I found in the financial data that I still think about every time someone describes Norway as a model for sustainable development. Norwegian government pension fund Global the Oil Fund, the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, currently owns shares in approximately 9,000 companies worldwide. It owns a piece of almost every publicly traded company on Earth. It also owns shares in ExxonMobil, in Shell, in TotalEnergies, in Chevron. The fund that Norway uses to finance its green transition is, simultaneously, one of the world's largest investors in the fossil fuel industry it is transitioning away from. I stared at those numbers for a while. I had been building a section of my notes titled "What Norway Gets Right." I deleted the title, because what I was looking at was not simply right or wrong, it was more complicated than the framework I arrived with. I felt, and I know this is not an academic thing to say, genuinely thrown, not betrayed, thrown. The way you feel when a person you thought you understood turns out to be more interesting than you gave them credit for. I called Marcus when I found this. It was midnight in Abuja. He picked up immediately. I told him what I had found. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "So Norway is making money from oil everywhere in the world while telling its own citizens to drive electric, and using the profit from foreign oil to fund getting off Norwegian oil." "Yes," I told him, "exactly that." He laughed, not a happy laugh. The laugh of someone who has just had a very complicated feeling confirmed. He said, "Dr. Novak, that is either the most cynical thing I have ever heard, or the most sophisticated. I have been thinking about that question ever since. I am still not sure which it is. What I do know is this. The strategy only works if citizens trust that the money is being used for the purpose stated. In Norway, that trust exists. It was built over centuries. It is the same trust that makes the whole system run, and that, not the fund structure, not the investment policy, is the thing Marcus cannot replicate next year. northern edge of Norwegian sovereignty, on the Svalbard archipelago, there is a global seed vault. It is buried in a tunnel in the permafrost of a mountain on the island of Spitsbergen, near the settlement of Longyearbyen. Inside, over 1.3 million seed varieties from almost every country on Earth, preserved in conditions that would survive a nuclear war or a century of climate disruption. Norway built and funds this facility not for Norway but for everyone. It charges no access fee. It stores seeds from countries whose governments have since changed, from research programs that no longer exist, from agricultural systems that have been replaced. It keeps the genetic history of human food production as a service to a future it will not live to see. In Longyearbyen, there are more polar bears than people. Roads end quickly, and anyone leaving the settlement boundary is required by law to carry a rifle. The permafrost prevents burial bodies must be returned to the mainland. Civilization in Svalbard is not expanding. It is precise and bounded and fully aware of where it ends. I have a specific memory from Longyearbyen that I keep returning to. I was walking near the edge of the settlement. In the early afternoon, the sun was low and orange even at midday. The way Arctic sun is in October, a permanent golden hour that makes everything look like a painting of itself. I could see, at the edge of the visible world, where the settlement ended, a sign, and beyond it, the open tundra, and the requirement that anyone passing the sign must be carrying a weapon. Not because of hostility, because of the bears, because the natural world here is not managed or curated. It is present, on its own terms, and the humans who have chosen to live here have accepted that their presence is conditional. The seed vault sits at the exact edge of what is possible for human habitation on this planet, preserving options for a future in which the warming of that same permafrost may make the vault itself eventually vulnerable. The Norwegians know this. The vault was designed with drainage systems to handle potential meltwater. They planned for the failure of the condition that makes the vault possible, because in Norway, planning for your own contingency is not pessimism. It is the minimum standard of competence. I sat in the cafeteria of the research station in Longyearbyen and something clicked into place that I had been circling for 3 weeks. The seed vault is not a Norwegian project. It serves the entire world. Norway built it, funds it, maintains it, and takes nothing from it. There is no return on investment. There is no strategic advantage. There is no leverage over the countries whose seeds are stored here. Norway built it because someone had to, and Norway was in the position to do it. And so Norway did it. And then I realized this is the same logic as the oil fund. The same logic as the opera house roof open to everyone. The same logic as the children marching on the 17th of May. The same logic as Eric watching the glacier. The same logic as the Lofoten fishermen who prepared for weather they did not hope for. Norway does not ask what it can get. It asks what it can build that will still be standing when it is gone. That is not an institutional design. That is not a policy framework. That is a value system that was hammered into a culture by 800 years of cold and scarcity and the understanding that nothing lasts unless you build it to last. The oil fund, the seed vault, the EV infrastructure, the public health care, the opera house roof, they are all the same decision, made by a society that learned, long before it had anything to spare, that the only rational response to an uncertain future is to invest in it. This was Marcus's answer, not the one he could implement next year, the one that explains why the things he is trying to implement are not yet working. I had been looking for the answer in institutions. The answer was never in the institutions. The institutions are what the answer looks like after it has been running for a very long time. Norway did not become Norway because it discovered oil. It became Norway because, For a very long time before the oil, it had no choice but to develop the culture that would eventually know what to do with oil when it arrived. I wrote Marcus a long email from Longyearbyen. I told him, the framework is not wrong, but the framework assumes a context that has to be built first. The context is trust. And trust is built not in an electoral cycle but in the accumulated memory of a community that has weathered hard winters together and learned that the alternative to working together is dying apart. He read it and replied, "So what do we do in the meantime?" I told him, the same thing Norway was doing for 800 years before it found oil. Build the institutions, demonstrate that they work. Protect the ones that work from the ones who want to use them for something else. It is slow. It is the slowest possible answer, but it is the only one I found that actually fits the evidence. The semester after I came back, I rewrote the first lecture of my course, the one I had been giving for 15 years about the resource curse and why resource-rich countries so often fail to convert natural wealth into lasting prosperity. I had always started with the oil. I now start before it. I start with the coastline, with the 4% of arable land. Fishing villages and the dried stockfish and the centuries of hard winters and the specific intelligence that develops in a population when the margin for error is very small, and the community is the only buffer between the asticess, individual, and the cold. My students find it frustrating. They want the policy prescription, the transferable framework, the thing they can take to their governments and implement. I tell them, the framework exists. Norway built it and it works. But the framework is not the starting point. The culture that makes the framework possible is the starting point. And building that in places that don't have 800 years of shared winter to draw on is the hardest problem in development economics. Not because we don't know what to do, because knowing what to do and having the social substrate to do it are not the same thing. Marcus still sends me emails from Abuja. He is still working on it. The oil is still there. So is the gap between what the framework says should happen and what is actually happening. He has not given up. Neither have I. But I no longer believe the answer is in the next paper I publish. I think the answer is in what gets built slowly, invisibly, across many years between people who share a difficult geography and learn, because they have to take care of each other. If this story changed how you think about what makes a wealthy country, I'd genuinely like to know what stayed with you most. Tell me where you're watching from. Marcus asked me at the beginning, what are we missing? I spent 3 weeks in Norway looking for the answer. What I found, at the very end, at the edge of the world, in a town where the dead cannot be buried because the ground is frozen and polar bears outnumber people, is that we were asking the wrong question. The question is not what Norway is doing right. The question is what Norway was doing for 800 years before it did anything.